Wednesday-community call for February 1st. It looks like this call is our 53rd meeting together, so that's awesome. Last time I sent out the notes last week. Last time we talked about these PRs here. A couple of them were merged, and I had to fix a spell check on mine, which I finally figured out how to do with the help of Mircha. And so thank you, Mircha. And we also went over again the metering pipeline and more information where we were making edits last week. And we thought maybe we would talk about moving into, we talked about changing bucket to metering class ID, and maybe this time we would talk about libside, aside, org agent, blah, blah, blah. But that's not going to happen this week. So I thought maybe this week we could go into, oops, remind me later. So just to let John know, this is the dash GitHub repo here. And so normally we come take a look at the different PRs that are in the queue and see if there's anything we'd like to cover today or discussion in Q&A. So today, so guys on the call, is there a PR or things we'd like to cover today? Okay, so
I guess I have a catch-up question from
sure.
Neglect of attention on my part for months in this group. Sorry for catching up, but so for example, this recent discussion on metering, this is it seems to be at the stage of documenting and describing the desired behavior, but for example, the existing P4 reference code is yet to catch up with some of those discussions, I imagine.
Yeah, the P4 stuff that we have, is here. I mean, this is what we have so far, and
so it must be on the order of, if there's been any change in the last 6 months or so, they're clearly not there.
Right. And Prince, that's the case, isn't it, Prince? We'll catch up the P4 as soon as we nail down the metering.
Yeah, I think that's what it is. Yeah. I think first we still have not nailed down, as we were mentioning, still under discussion. So there are a lot of feedback coming in, and then once we have really firm up the design and all the feedback has been incorporated, then can we only go ahead and start to incorporate it into the P4.
And do we believe most of the results of the discussion have been checked into other documents elsewhere?
There's a document here, general, and then it's the SONiC HLD in Markdown, and so metering requirements here. And so, we kind of start here, and this is where we start. We actually started in a different document and morphed over to this, if this is helpful at all. So we start here in the SONiC HLD, and then down below is where the this kind of stuff is, where we put it inside of the content here.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to get the general impression that there's the discussion that turns into documentation. That's the documentation is intended to be the most up-to-date thing in this repo now.
Yeah.
Other code parts of things are lagging behind. As the discussions settle, then we'll move that. Yeah. Okay, makes sense.
That's what we try to do, so that we can keep it up.
Yep, thanks.
Yep. So, okay. And James Lowe, I saw an email from you. Did you have something you wanted to talk about today?
Oh, yes, I was wondering that maybe I look at the P4 language as the behavior model, the P4 code, and maybe we can merge all of those into our existing the BMV to this directory.
Do you want me to present your email, or do you want to present your screen?
Sure, no problem.
Which one do you want? Do you want to present?
The email.
Do you want me? Okay, all right. I'll try and grab it. And give me 1 sec here, guys. From James. Was it this one, James?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I was looking at the PR, the issues 236 and 292.
Mm-hmm.
It seems related to the underlay, the support for the dash BMV2. So I go through the code and I find out that maybe in the P4 model, the P4 code, the P4 language, there are quite a few, the data plane data that maybe we could merge all those into our right now the BMV2 code. I don't know. Right.
As in, is your question merge in all underlay data plane features into the?
Yeah, that's my question. Not all of them. Maybe we should just the cherry pick, or I'm not sure. Maybe, but pretty much we need. I'm sure we need some of them. Right. I mean,
we have 10 P4 files. These are ours that we have in our.
That's ours. Right.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
So I would defer to looks like Marian and others, but I thought there was recent discussion. I thought there was recent discussion that maybe they wanted to keep the P4 code as dash specific as possible, and for underlay do minimal things like maybe just unicast forwarding out of a determined port or something like that. Simple.
But, well, I was thinking that since it's been there, and then in the future we are talking about this appliance, or maybe we may need more. I don't know. I'm not sure. Yeah, I know Marian. He wants to keep it as simple as possible.
I think we can look at it. We can look at it in a different way. That would be just one of my suggestions. Is basically, we have identified the SI APIs that are applicable towards achieving certain aspect of this underlay that are related to the DPU. So if we want that kind of a approach, then and we can see that okay, based on those APIs, what is some of the things that we really need out of BMV2? Mm-hmm. But if that is already available in the BMV2, I don't know what we are bringing in from the P4 language. The one thing that I can basically see today is that if we want to really go ahead and create a certain P4 model to mimic that functionality that is required to support those SI APIs, then we can go ahead and do that. Because today, as we know, right, in order to test our this test harness, we are really generating those implementation of the SI API, especially on the overlay side, and then calling through the P4 runtime. So we can take this same approach. We can create a P4 runtime implementation of those underlay APIs, and then see which support we need, and then come up with this P4 model for that. That would be my suggestion for that. Yeah.
In your question, sorry, if it's Alan, I think you mentioned a particular version of P4 source code for switch.p4 that's been published. I will warn against using that unless somebody says they have implemented SI on top of it and is willing to publish that, because that published code that you link to is 2016 era and nobody's touched it in 6-7 years.
Right. So James, I'm so sorry that I didn't look at your email earlier in the morning. As everyone here is saying, right, that there are certain features that we have already identified in Dash, but I think your point is very good, that we should go through some of this a little bit more, see if something else is applicable. Is that the question?
Right.
Okay. Yeah, some of these conversations have also happened earlier, but I can go through in detail one more time with you, see if there's anything else that is applicable. For example, lag ECMP, basic ACL, for example, yeah, mirroring. So yeah, I think we can also go through this in some more detail and discuss it in the next meeting or after. Prince, maybe we can send you some um, summary. We can send it to everyone here to what we.
Yeah, this is Chris. Hi, Alan. It's good that you sort of, sorry, not Alan, James. I'm glad you came in and just sort of took an independent look at this. It's sort of a reality check, right? I think though, Andy's point is probably a really good one. 2 points he made. One, the code base itself was kind of, call it unmaintained for a while. And the other is the control plane work to tie it in is non-trivial. And so there's this big body of work to make a full dash underlay for a model, a lot of work. And meanwhile, there's still outstanding work on the items we agree should be in the dash behavior model, like the things we're talking about still, like metering, billing, accounting, that kind of thing, and other features that are dash specific. That's still a non-trivial body of work to be done. And so at some point we have to make decisions. What are the resources that can work on all these tasks, and which ones are the ones that are really urgent, and decide, because at some point a dash DPU will sort of be buried inside of a smart switch, and a lot of these features are going to be handled by the fabric ASIC and not the DPU. The DPU will just be a bump in the wire, sort of a hairpin mode middleware box inside the smart switch, and all these routing and switching features will become kind of irrelevant in that case. So how much does the community want to invest in a standalone DPU that looks like a full SONiC box versus focusing on the things we have to do? So I just want to throw that out as a balancing opinion, right? In an ideal world, we do all these things, but we probably have to pick and choose where we focus our attention on. I don't know if anyone else wants to comment on that.
Right, completely agree with Chris. Yeah, we can have a small conversation offline, James, but we can also bring this up in BMV2 meeting if needed for further discussion.
So are these accurate enough notes for this email thread? Just things to think about.
I guess the other small comment would be, prioritizing the work towards things that need to be done for Dash versus would be nice to be done for Dash. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I want to probably cross check my understanding of the Dash APIs, since because on the Alibaba side we are kind of also debating to see how we were leveraging this effort. So right now we understanding is the behavior model is mainly for the control plane to generate those Dash API to generate things. So it's more like a define the logical behavior for the data plan, but we don't expecting this is the P4 will be used as data plan. For saying that means that, say for example, like we would just say, hey, this is kind of like say behaviors which we want to like a DPU to be achieved, and these like APIs, the control plan will come in. But from the real implementation point of view, or like say this is more like say the checkpointing. So, but once we go real deployment, we could add something extra on top of it, or like say we may not necessary to using the Dash API to calling it. Say for example, like right now, those Dash API will be stored as a radius in the behavior. We internally we have the concern on that, so we kind of thinking. So I just want to see that would that be kind of the way more consider the Dash as a reference, or in the SONiC society, would that be the correct understanding?
I think in my understanding is this is the reference. It's a reference implementation, And then this is there to test to ensure that, okay, at least your SI API behavior can be tested. And then this is the extent of that one it is. But if you can take this one as a reference to implement your hardware, to mimic something like this, then of course, it should be the starting point, right? So.
But a reference for not just the control plane API, but also the packet processing behavior, I thought was the intent.
Both.
I guess when we say control plane, generally people basically think this one is that can I really take this one and generate so P4 runtime and then use this one in my control plane. The all along, if you're just talking about from the SONiC dash perspective, SONiC dash is not actually trying it like this, right? SONiC dash has a separate schema for the control plane that has basically been, at least as a reference, has been published by Microsoft. So you basically be using that to talk to your SONiC dash DPU, which eventually gets translated into some Redis schema, and then this drives the SI API to program your DPU. So clearly that's the entire workflow. But for your reference implementation, if you want to really take this one as your behavior model and then generate the P4 runtime and then use this one in your control plane for testing it out, yes, I mean that can be achieved, right? From the reference perspective, but definitely not as I understood from Alibaba's question, is that from Eddie's question, sorry, is that this is they're specifically asking for the SONiC implementation.
Yeah, basically we are trying to see. We don't want to, like I say, going too far away from the community agreement approach. But if we see some kind of a inefficiency, we want to they also try to avoiding it. So that's why we are looking on this. That's why we kind of debating on that. Say today we kind of say all data plan we also take pretty much take care of for the fully programmability point of view. So this one I agree, for the reference model, it's awesome. So it's kind of say I can give you say this is our business approach. So then we can do it, but we don't expecting the P4 will be real our data plan handling piece. It's more logical description piece.
There's no requirement on any vendor that they use this P4 code in their product at all.
Okay. Yes,
the vendor can implement their product any way they want. The P4 code is intended to be, it should work like this under the covers.
So I think the question is something like, if we are utilizing this BMV2 P4 to generate the Dash APIs, then is it a complete standard or it's a reference? Because if we look at BMV2 as reference P4, then we derive the Dash APIs from that BMV2 P4, then will it be complete or not is probably the question.
Yeah, is it a correct subset? Is it a correct subset, right?
Right. So, Prince, if you can please, add more to this. The Dash APIs are not just, as is derived from the current BMV2 P4, but we have also updated it on top with other details that is needed, like for example HA, like for example metering, etc.
Yeah, I think we have to really go back to our first principle that we basically said, hey, we are going to have these P4 model that we are creating, the behavior model for Dash as a single source of truth to generate the Dash APIs. And then when we say Dash APIs, we essentially are saying Dash SI APIs, right? So if we say that this is a single source of truth, and then we also said that even for HA and metering, we have to come up with some means of defining it in P4 so that we know that, okay, we are not deviating from it, because otherwise, we are really, it will not remain kosher, so to speak, right? we will start to introduce something on top of it, and we will not know where this really came from. Today we have a different model for the underlay APIs in the SI community, where I believe what they do is they create this Visio model to define a logical pipeline, and that becomes a source of truth for them to really generate the underlay APIs, and then they make sure that they keep it updated, and then this is everybody agrees to that. Similarly, here from the day one, we agreed that we are going to have a single source of truth. Instead of Visio document to define a logical pipeline, we're going to use P4 to define a logical pipeline for each and everything. And if where there are deviations where it's absolutely not possible, we said we will not leave any stone unturned to do this thing. So let's make sure that we do that. And so we remain on the right path, as opposed to really introducing something where we can't go back and validate how we really came to it, right?
Yeah, you can't execute the Visio diagram. You can execute the P4, and that's the big difference.
Yeah.
And I'm still in favor of it until we prove that it can't work. I just want to mention I pasted a link in the chat. It sort of goes back to the minimum underlay features in order to do at least our unit testing, our CI/CD testing, and Anton had compiled a list of the APIs which would allow us to complete our unit tests and take some of the tests that are currently only running, for example, on a Intel DPU, that were in the PTF test. They could, if we completed this list, we'd be able to run them on the Dash behavioral model as well. So, if going back to prioritizing our efforts, we could look at that list of switch P4 as kind of the perfect complete soft switch model, but in reality what we need is this to do CI/CD testing as a minimum, so that we could test the Dash overlay features and the necessary underlay setup and have some kind of a harmony with actual physical device testing. So to restate that, we have tests in the PTF test cases for Dash that can't be run in the behavioral model, but with a little bit of effort could be. I shouldn't say little, with a certain amount of defined effort. This effort here, if we did this, we could then run those tests on the soft model. So that I would take that as a reference for what's important to fulfill this mission of a reference model versus what would be nice to have in a full-blown implementation.
Yeah, no, this is a great idea. I think what happens is that if we have a minimal thing support, then clearly from end to end, testing can be met. And I would recommend that there is a pins project in SONiC which actually defined a psi.p4 for underlay, and that we could basically leverage that. We may not be able to just get everything right from there from the get-go, but at least as a reference, and we leverage that, and then that can actually reduce the amount of work that we need to do to bring in the P4 behavior model for underlay, just minimum set as you suggested, Chris. We can probably do that. Yeah.
I'm glad you brought that up, because I think I mentioned that P4 many months ago when I learned about it. Maybe I've heard about it at a conference or something, but it's worth considering. There might be some code we can just borrow.
Exactly. Yeah.
I don't know if there's a SI interface written for it, though. It's a P4 runtime interface. Instrumenting the control plane manually as opposed to auto-generated is not trivial, right? A lot of
plumbing. Yeah, so it's you are right. Actually, I mean the entire objective, or at least in the beginning, the objective of the Pins project was to generate the P4 runtime, so it can be utilized in the controller side, and then write a P4 runtime, a server for SONiC, so that it can communicate to some SONiC switches through controllers, right? So, but even then afterwards, everything was driven through however the circuitry is in the SONiC, right? Where things go into the Redis database, and then eventually turn out into the SYNCD, and then eventually the SI API. But the SI APIs were whatever the SI APIs were before, they were not auto-generated. So we do need to, of course, plug this entire thing into our I guess, the tooling that we have to generate the SI implementation and so forth, as we bring in and leverage the SI.p4 from SONiC for the underlay, and then introduce into our code base.
Could we touch base a little bit on the status of development of the SONiC stack for Dash? We talked about all the API. I mean, if whatever you're talking about is you're done with that.
Sure, we have some of the SONiC team members on the call.
All I want to know is we talked about SONiC APIs here, which is basically a set of attributes so that you can configure specific, UENIs and all that stuff, right? We integrated so far. The SI server that we have version is the SI 3. If there's also, and on top of that, we basically replace the SONiC stack with SI Challenger. You all know that. Now, the SIND integration is what we kind of need, and that's what the Redis database kind of where we tie things together there. I saw in the roadmap that May was the delivery of the SONiC Dash. So I guess my question is, what is the status of that? Are we still on target for May? And the second thing is, what did they use as far as attribute sets to populate the database for Dash? Because we talked about there are missing attributes, right? We talk about missing stuff that needs to be provided here.
Aren't those attributes already defined in the SONiC-HLD? Aren't they already listed?
I haven't rechecked that. I don't know if they cover all of them.
Yeah, that's the outcome of the defining the SI dash APIs, and those attributes are essentially the outcome of the SI dash APIs. But one of the things, Vincent, that besides SIND, the main thing that we really need is the org agent, right? Yeah, these are the ones.
Sorry, what did you say?
No, I was saying, Vincent, is that besides SIND, as you mentioned, right? I think the major work that's going to need to come in is in the org agent, supporting the org agent of SONiC.
So I guess if a vendor is to integrate into SIND, is the assumption that anything on top of the Redis server is Microsoft provided for Dash? It wouldn't make sense, right?
That's my understanding. That
I think
really
this
the
is
vendors,
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
the vendors need to implement their libsci for their Dash that can get it integrated into SYNCD as a platform build option, which probably needs another discussion how that's going to work in practice, right? Because there's the SONiC build image infrastructure, and we haven't really, to date, I don't know of any discussions in this forum about how that should proceed. But when you build a SONiC build image, vendors add their platform as a build option, and it just becomes part of the bona fide SONiC build image workflow, which is all Debian based. And so,
so I think what is the question? Top of the stack, above the side dash API.
My original question is, when are we going to be able to get? What is the status of the May delivery of the SONiC Dash stack?
Oh, I think the HUD, right? So, there. I think a large portion of this of the control plan or management stack, you call it whatever you call about it, I think has been implemented, and some of them actually being. I think it's been open source in the SWSS repo. There's a dash org and a PR. But I think the currently you cannot really build the image because the SI implementation currently is still not available, right? So publicly, not available. So in order to build an image, you need to work with those vendors, and they provide you the binaries. Oh, sorry, not binary. I mean, provide you the SI libraries, and you can build the image on that, and doing test.
Well, so maybe I give you a concrete example. I didn't pull the SONiC build image for that, but I just pulled the two repos that are needed, the SWS command and the site Redis.
Yeah.
Site Redis basically includes syncd.
Yeah.
I pulled that and I was able, with some changes in the syncd, like syncd didn't know anything about dash attributes, obviously. So I managed to have a set of div to basically have syncd know about dash, and I was able to then run the site changer on top of syncd with my libsci. So the syncd itself, the component syncd, is the main thing we care about. Well, it's kind of the next level up, I suppose, for us with libsci and all that.
Yeah.
Besides the whole building a new platform, all that jazz, right? If you have syncd, syncd is the next step. So is that still part of the main delivery, or? I understand it's not on the branch we have access to. I'm just asking for a timeline here.
I mean, when that be made available in the public, I don't have that timeline. Yeah, so for that, I think various components contributed by various people. So we'll need to check what exact timeline we can make that available.
Vincent, that's interesting that you were able to modify syncd to get it to kind of build. It might be useful to have a PR, not necessarily one that would ever get accepted, but just as a reference to show the diffs or some other output, just a diff output, and share that with the people at Microsoft we're working on, and see if your mutual understandings of what syncd needs to do are aligned.
Yeah, I can do that.
For the SONiC build image part, I think it should at some point follow what is being done in the switch side. So individual vendor will have their platform available in the SONiC build image, right? For the
So I know there is one work in progress is to actually take the BMV2 that we have in the dash repo and be able to integrate with that with the syncd. So in this case, if we call the dash API, should be able to program the BMV2 and make the overlay part working. Yeah, so that one I think it's in progress. I think 2 or 3 months I think should be make available. Yeah, on that part.
I think when we talk about platform in SONiC build image, I mean, to be honest, it's kind of orthogonal anyway, because all vendors will create their own platform. It's done for people who use switches and all that stuff. So that's orthogonal. The main thing is you should be able to pull, the goal at the end of the day is you should be able to even build a VS SONiC build image and be able to launch it in some kind of VM and configure dash parameters, dash objects.
No, I don't fully agree with it. I mean, I think the goal is to having SONiC running on the dash, so therefore, build image is a part of the scope of the work.
I'm not saying otherwise, but once the support for dash attributes, configuration of objects for dash and all that is there, creating a new platform for a vendor is no different than what it is now without dash. That's what I'm getting at.
The current SONiC VS that's there is not really connected with the switch BMV2 either today. That is anyway a method that can be used to start with, and then eventually also integrated with the BMV2 or some other soft switch if we have. Non-BMV2 version. Another question here was that since we derive the the dash APIs from the current BMV2, and given that the BMV2 is not complete, should we look at dash Psi APIs as a reference or as a standard? My thinking that it should be looked at as a standard, because it's not just the APIs that have been derived from the P4, from the BMV2 P4, but we are also updating it by hand, for example, in HA and metering cases. So I would think that the -SI APIs are standard and not really reference. So please correct me if as needed.
Could you clarify on the metering case? Do we have manually written APIs for metering? Did I miss them?
Mirroring or metering? Sorry, Marianne, which one did you say?
Yeah, metering.
Metering.
Do we have APIs?
I'm guessing since metering is still under discussion, I would think that the metering APIs also should be updated at some point as soon as it is closed. I believe that's still under discussion, right? All I'm trying to say is that any feature that we are discussing, the SI API, the Dash APIs for that in SI will be available sometime, right? Once it is closed. And at that point, it becomes standard, it's not really incomplete as such. I would say it is complete.
Does anyone else have an opinion?
I mean, the APIs are done when Microsoft says they look feature complete for all the features they want, right? Not before.
Okay. And then they would be standard. So
I'm presuming there'll be a Dash version 1.1 with additional APIs in the future after that at some point, right? Or 1.2 or 2.0 or something, just like SI has had versions.
Is that right? Prince and Guohan would go version based?
The Dash will be part of the Dash API part of the site, right? So there will be 1.11, 1.12, something like that, I think.
That's fine as long as the PRs are merged. We would think that they are standard at that point, right? Of course, we'll keep adding new features on top. That was probably
to answer Reshma, to answer your question in terms of standard versus the reference, it seems that we are trying to standardize SI API,
yes,
but not standardizing the models, right? In other words,
exactly. BMV2.
Yeah, exactly, the BMV2. So since we are only standardizing the SI API, see, the idea here is that if you look at the way SI community has worked, we always take those underlay APIs, lack of a better word, the pre-Dash APIs, whenever the SI APIs have gone to the SI community and were deliberated upon and eventually ratified and become a standard and become part of the standard header file. That was the process that was taken up, the discuss and so forth, right? But if we are doing the same thing on the Dash APIs, which is we call it SI overlay APIs, we are not really, at least exposing the models into the community, SI community. Instead, we are just saying, okay, whatever we have generated out of those models is the one that we are taking. And as the models change, the API is going to change. And then, of course, the versioning will be required over a period of time. But this is what I see how we are doing it. So to me, the SI APIs we are trying to standardizing it and not the model.
Yeah. Right. I completely agree with that.
Okay, so
yeah, I'm liking definition of standardizing the model, but I thought the purpose of using P4 was to have a precise description of the model that will be a standard
and executable.
Yeah, that you can verify, but verify easier than you can verify Visio. So why we are saying it's not a standard? It may change, of course, but it's a standard anyway.
Sure. I mean, so we can say that definitely the BMV2 is closest to the SI API in terms of what can be executed, There is no question there. The only thing is that we have always been referring to BMV2 as reference model, right? Which it is. We need not think of Dash APIs as reference. We think of the Dash APIs as standard, while we continue to have the BMV2 as a reference model. For sure, that can be used on the hardware. They should be mostly in line, what is there in Dash API and what is there in BMV2, which is why BMV2 also will be standard, right? The reference model will be also, what I'm saying is there could be gaps, right? As we know, we have some gaps right now. We just want to clarify, not from that standpoint, not discussing BMV2, but discussing from Dash standpoint. The Dash APIs are viewed as standard, and Dash APIs are not really viewed as reference. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, but that's a question of scope. Like, if something is at the moment out of scope in BMV2, it doesn't mean that like BMV2 is not a standard. Like, we have the full definition of VNet to VNet. It doesn't mean that it's not a standard for VNet to VNet. We cannot say that, okay, some other behavior, some other packet transformations will be compatible. I don't think so.
Actually, I would take like say Psi API or this object is more like standard because it's defined at object level. It's more easy to understand. But for this Dash API, my take is more like a reference because we define it's like the P4 is the behavior model. Then we use that one to define the policies. What is the object will be needed only for that particular reference model. So that's why I would say like that one doesn't sound like it's standard. I would still consider this as a reference.
Yeah, Eddie, I think I get your point, and also Reshma's and Marian's point also. I think what we should do is we can say it in this way, that for generating Psi APIs, this BMV2 model is a standard. However, for building your hardware, this P4 model is a reference. And also for basically, if you want to do a control plane, then this is also a reference. But for that's generating Psi APIs, huh?
Yes, correct. But that's not the question that I'm asking. I'm not asking anyone to build hardware exactly as it is described in here.
Exactly. So I think that's what I'm saying. I get your point. Right? So I think in that point, Marian, why don't we do one thing, right? If we want to say this thing is a single source of truth and this is a standard, then I suggest that we submit the model along with the Psi APIs to the Psi community, so as to show that, okay, this is the one that they need to ratify as well. It should be, the P4 model should also be committed and checked into the Psi repo in the OCB Psi community, so as to show that, okay, this is how we are going to generate this thing, and this is what the 1.0 is, and then with something that either people can auto-generate or we have pre-generated header files, right, that we are going to be committing to that repo. I think we should do this thing so as to show that, okay, this is a standard. Both of them are going to be standard. The source of truth through which we are generating out from, and then also the .h file.
Yeah, sure.
Do we actually need to check in the model and the code generator into Psi repo, or can we just refer to it to a commit ref, which it's stored for all time in GitHub anyway? Copying files doesn't feel good to me.
Just details. We can, of course, it will be maintained. We can have a submodule, we can have a pointer, we can have whatever. But yeah, the same way, like you can argue the same thing about Visio for standard Psi. No one tells you to build hardware exactly how this Visio describes, but
exactly.
And pack it in and pack it out should be the same as described in the Visio.
So is that an action item we'll take, is to submit the model?
If we can
That's something
submit the
that I
model,
will do myself, because that was actually a request from Psi community to have all the submissions stuff besides headers.
Okay.
It's already a plan.
Ah. Okay. We only have about 12 minutes left, and I don't know that I quite got the answer to this question here, which is, are we saying that in about 2 months we'll have what Vincent needs? Was that what we were saying?
I mean, I don't know what exactly Vincent needs, but I think we'll.
So I found a date somewhere on some roadmap on the wiki. I don't recall exactly where. It was basically on the release for the next release, I think.
So you have what you need, Vincent?
Well, I mean, there's a date there. I just want to know if, how far are we from that, I suppose.
Which release? Where did you find it?
Yeah, I need to find that. I'll find that.
Was it on the SONiC page?
Yeah, it was somewhere. It was definitely on the SONiC wiki. Maybe some kind of planning.
Oh, okay.
I'll find the page again.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, hopefully we get what you need. And then, Hanif, did someone want to follow up on this part, the pins project, and if there's code we can borrow, or do we need to do this? Anyone on the call, it doesn't have to be Hanif. I mean,
yeah, as I was mentioning before, right? I think we, as part of getting this minimal support, right, we can just look at which part of which portion of the sci.p4 that we can leverage. So that'll be that work can be done as part of the PR that was already, I guess, flashed by, I guess, or mentioned by Chris, right?
236 up here.
I believe so. Yeah.
At some point, we could have a detailed discussion on what we can do. Basically, sci.p4 is the upstream P4 that goes with the pins project right now. It has basic layer 3 routing, ACL mirroring. That probably is sufficient for the underlay that we are looking for here. If that is the reason why Hanif brought it up, and we can discuss this further. I think there is also extensions or how we merge basically the sci.p4 with the existing P4 for the overlay part of Dash discussion that we have been having here. We can discuss that in some more detail, probably offline or here in upcoming calls.
Okay, like tomorrow's behavioral model call, or give it a week.
Yeah, either way is fine. We can discuss it tomorrow too.
Okay. Well, we have 9 minutes left. Is there anything else for today? No. Sounds like a no. John, I hope this was informative since it was your first time in. We also have high availability work groups for Dash, and we also have a behavioral model work group is tomorrow, which is the P4 behavioral model, where we talk more in depth about that. So did anyone have other items they want to talk about today, or would you rather have your 8 minutes back?
I just found the page, sorry.
Oh, you did? Where is that? Do you want to put it in the chat window? Or give it to me?
No, it's a GitHub page.
Okay. Awesome.
It's a SONiC 2023-05 release.
Okay.
And it's got Dash Infra on line number 12.
Okay.
That's the only thing I saw about Dash in the schedule.
Yeah. Okay, Guohan, here it is.
Well, that's, I think, is the infrastructure part.
Like I say, I just don't know. and I think vendors in general, we kind of need to figure out, we're talking here a lot about leap science, so that's fine and that's needed. That's all good, but that's only part of the equation.
It almost sounds like a little seminar workshop needs to be conducted to say, hey, DPU vendors, this is the process and approach for integrating this into a bona fide SONiC image. Right? All the stalwarts, all the incumbent ASIC vendors who are part of SONiC know this. They have teams of people crawling all over the SONiC repo and doing things all the time. But there's probably new players now in Dash who haven't gone through the whole SONiC boot camp, and maybe just a walkthrough, a summary saying, okay, here's the process to get your syncd into the bona fide build workflow. Is that a reasonable thing to consider?
Yeah, but Chris, the fact is, if SONiC doesn't know about Dash, then you can integrate all day long. You won't be able to do anything with it, right?
Well, no, that's like a separate topic, right?
Right.
The top-down infrastructure has to be there to meet at the Redis DB, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
And there are people working on it. It sounds like we need better visibility into the status of that. That's your original question. But it seems like there's also possibly a gap in terms of what's the plan for vendors contributing their part that fits into that, beyond SCI. Maybe
Would
I'm
that
wrong.
be something we could provide or talk about in a session in one of the community meetings, Guohan and Prince?
Which part? Sorry.
A process, what we just talked about, a process for them to integrate into the SONiC image?
That is very vendor specific, right? So I think we need to get the vendor to talk about how they plan to integrate the sign to the SONiC image. But I think on the the platform independent part, we're committed to get into the SONiC image.
Well, I guess I would ask, what constitutes completion for a vendor to say, you can go to SONiC build image and say platform equals excite make config, right, or something like that. What are all the prerequisites to make that a complete task? Maybe I'm advocating and don't need to be, but it seems like there's a lot of probably some tribal knowledge that at least a bullet list of things saying all these objectives have to be achieved for the vendors to have done their job, in terms of building a bona fide image. And likewise, Microsoft has to build everything down through the orc agent to have done their part, and maybe parts of the syncd code base. I'm just thinking maybe a review of the top items would be useful. Because it seems like
I think this is, there's two part, right? So I think be able to run SONiC on some of the DPU platform, I think is certainly available. If you work with DPU vendors directly, you'll probably be able to get those code. You can run SONiC, and then the SWSS, all those code are available, right? So, but I think the process of getting all of them to be upstreamed open source, right? So that I think might take some time. I think the item on this I don't think it will include all of them, right? So it's just mainly on the infrastructure part, which SWSS and those basic things, and be able to to be included in the image. But in order to build a workable image that work on specific DPU, I think there's still some work. You need to work with the DPU vendors to get that part. I mean, just
if you are a DPU
speaking.
vendor, I think, Guohan, if you are a DPU vendor why would you work with another DPU vendor, and why would the DPU vendor work with you when they're competing with you? So I think the idea here is if a new DPU vendor comes in and says that, okay, I have a DPU and I have a libsci based on your SCI APIs. What's the next step in terms of really integrating and testing it to ensure that I'm qualified for SONiC Dash, right? So I think what is the minimum set of things that is basically, is it that, okay, you just go ahead and create a libsci and then integrate with just the SONiC or sorry, the SYNC-D up till the SYNC-D in a very stripped down version of SONiC, and then be able to test it at that level, and not have end-to-end testing. What is the minimal thing? Maybe that's something that I'm just again advocating on the behalf of the vendors part.
Yeah. No, I get that part. I think there's two aspects of this question. So one is that yes, in terms of the control of the DPU, yes, you need to provide the site, you need to do the integration, and we have set of tests you can use it to run, right? So we believe we have the site test, we have SONiC management test, we have XR test to run, right? So then there is another part of the work is that since this is this is basically a platform OS image, right? So you have to do other things, which is not really different from ASIC box, those switch box. You have to integrate your platform, you have to get those temperatures. In case you have fan, then you need to do those semi integration, which is already in SONiC, right? So then depending on your bootloaders, your CPU type, your ARM core, then you have to build build an image on that, right? So currently the SONiC does allow you to build a ARM image, but maybe different DPU vendors have a different image format. So on that front, you have to integrate with the image build process with in the build image. So those part, I think it's a every switch ASIC vendors have been worked how to integrate those part into SONiC. So they have a they know how to do it. Then the only thing new here is a side part, right? So, but I'm saying that not just a side part, but other parts is also needed in order to build a whole image that you can put on a DPU and run it, right? So.
Just for curiosity, when do we think we'll have a community image for SONiC Dash? A rough estimate. It's like this year, next year, like we have for
I think that to be, this is a good question. When we are talking about community, you need to have all this, all those things to be uploaded, right? So the site library, there's all those things to be uploaded. Unfortunately, I do not have answer, but I think we're committed to get, the more platform independent component ready, right? So at least on the May, we'll have all this infrastructure to be ready. So yeah. So and then but I don't think we'll have all the feature to be complete because there are still some spec being discussed, right? So then.
Yeah, and I agree. And these are the components that needs to be done. But for example, what will make you happy? Let's say.
Make me happy. Well, so I think we'll need to have all these things to be uploaded to really, anybody can take, the build image just like the switch to be able to, download and try it Dash, right? So I think that is a goal that we're to achieve. I believe, we'll definitely get there, just like with the switch boxes, right? So it's just, maybe, I think there may be some, thoughts. Okay, DPU vendors say I don't have everything complete, right? So, maybe it's not the right time to update, to upload. So that once I upload, I have to give support, right? So, those kind of concerns, maybe those things that they are waiting for all the feature to be completed to get things into the public, right? So. I don't know. I'm just speculating, right? So, but I think that's a process that we'll work with the community to walk through on that. At least on the Microsoft part, right? So we'll do those uploading or trying to, bring BMV2 into the picture so that even without the DPU, people can still do some testing on Dash. Yeah.
And the other one is there any desire to have a community image for the DPU itself, or that will be skipped and it will be only for smart switches?
No, I think about on the DPU. I think about when you talk about smart switch, you mean the ASIC plus because I run out of time. But I think the answer is yes, right? So think about the smart switch. The DPU is also running SONiC, so there will be an image for that. I have to drop, but I think yeah. So it's.
Guohan, question for you when you're clarifying the PI components. Are you expecting all the Microsoft side of the PI components to be there by May? Is that the date I heard?
Not all the parts, right? Because I think we still have features here, developing progress,
right,
as I said, right? So, but I think the basic part, for example, VNet, those things I think will be there.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right, thanks. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks, Guohan. Thanks, everyone. I think, guys, I'll probably have to call it for the day. It's 10:04. I'll let you go back to your other meetings. We can pick it up next week. I want to thank everyone for coming, and I'll post the notes like I normally do. And I hope you have a good day.
Yeah, thanks, Christina.
Thanks, Christina.
Okay, you guys have a good one. Bye-bye.